My name is Ashley, and this is Let's Talk Dispatch.
I do. You're gonna do it. Do it really well.
And I believe the world needs more dispatchers.
Around in the mud, blood, and
plus
beer.
years that I'm not working 4th of July. 4th of July.
Saying community policing, right? What about community dispatch?
So on this show, with the help of my guests, we will educate, empower, and support the heroes behind the headset. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode here of Let's Talk Dispatch with me, Ashley, the raspy dispatcher. As I'm watching my intro, I'm like, oh, I've cut my hair off completely again, so I'm probably going to have to update all of that. So if you're looking at me and like thinking about my intro, like, oh, they're different. They are. I've cut my hair completely off again. So last time I cut it, it was during COVID, or I cut it and then COVID happened and then the world stopped. So I was like, well, might as well grow it back out, because it's hard to get a haircut in these times. So short hair, same me. Another episode of Let's Talk Dispatch. And my guest today has over 27 years of experience under their belt as a police dispatcher and 25 of those years as a CTO. Let's welcome my guest, Eric. Hi, Eric.
Hi, Ashley.
How you doing?
I'm pretty good.
Yeah? 27 years. That is like... I couldn't even freaking imagine.
I wouldn't have thought it would be that case, but it's worked out. It's been fun.
Yeah.
I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do when I grow up, and I haven't quite figured it out yet. So, although I think I'm getting closer.
Well, how'd you get into public safety?
Well, so out of high school, my first job, because I work in Anchorage, Alaska, and so it's basically hospitality industry is a big thing. So I worked at a hotel. And as a hotel operator, which, as it turns out, was a pretty good introduction to what a dispatcher might actually be like, because it turns out you're managing a lot of stuff. You're on the phone a lot of the time. And I took the job probably way more seriously than I needed to, but that ended up working out for me. But so that was my job to do while I was in college, trying to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up. And but my best friend at the time, we were operators together, and she went off to a different hotel to work in a different job, but she called me and said, hey, there's this ad in the paper to be a police dispatcher, and it pays pretty well, and we're qualified, so you and I are applying. Like,
those are the best friends. You know what I mean? Like,
oh yeah,
hey, we're doing this thing. Oh, we are. Yep, we already put your name down. And you're like, all right, I'll be there.
Oh, and I tried to talk my way out of it, because I can talk myself out of a good time for sure. But she's like, nope, we're doing this. So I'm like, okay. And then we both applied, and turns out I got it and she didn't. But yeah, it all my superpower during the whole process was that I didn't really think I was necessarily qualified. I mean, I didn't have anything that I thought would really lead me to be a good dispatcher necessarily, except for the customer service stuff. But as it turns out, that's a lot of it. And like being able to like deal with chaotic situations.
It really, I don't think people realize how much it is a customer service job as well. And really, one of the great things about it, I think, is that there's no experience needed. And if you work in customer service, which a lot of folks have some level of customer service on their resume, it really does set you up to be successful in this line of work, in addition to the training you receive.
Oh yeah, no, I tell people that I can train you to be more efficient. I can train you to ask the right questions at the right time. But there's a couple things that I can't train you. If you can't type at all, it's going to be really tough. And if you're not a nice person, it's also going to be really tough, because I can't make you a nice person.
Yeah, no, it's true. And I mean, the way like cadence comes across a line, especially to someone who's like going through it, I mean, it can definitely heighten a situation or de-escalate it, right? So it's super important.
Oh, and people can read your mood for sure over the phone.
Ain't that the truth? So Alaska, let's talk about that, because I feel, what was one of those 911 like police shows? I feel like they were out in Alaska and they get like a bear call. And, I dispatch police in the city, and I'm from California, so like animals are not really a thing in my tool belt that I need to deal with when answering calls. But I would imagine the type of calls that you receive in Alaska, just because of where it is, do you have that wildlife aspect as well that you guys are dispatch dealing with?
Oh,
Or
for
are
sure.
you guys more in the city and I'm talking crazy right
Well,
now?
no, I mean, the thing about Anchorage is the big city in Alaska.
Mhm, mhm,
And so we're as metropolitan as you can kind of get. But the
mhm.
cool thing about Anchorage is it's like about 15 minutes away from Alaska
Oh,
because,
no.
we're surrounded by the rest, obviously. So yeah,
Mhm.
we have bear calls for
Oh
sure.
my
Bears
gosh.
will come into town because they want to eat stuff. Uh, and, we deal with lots of moose, people,
Oh my gosh.
in the lower 48, people deal with like, vehicles that hit deer or whatever. We
Yeah.
have vehicles that hit moose. Um,
Okay, so I feel like if you hit a moose, like, that's it. Like, that car's done, like,
it's not great.
poor moose. No?
Yeah. Yeah. You're not going to get your deposit back
Oh,
for
man.
sure.
And try convincing a moose to move out the way, I could see that being difficult as well.
Yeah. They're surprisingly fleet on their feet.
Well, what was it like for you in the beginning? Like we said, you've been doing this for a long time, and thank you so much for your service because, like, not a lot of people can say they dispatch for 27 years. Like, it's a tough job, and it's long hours, and it's short staffing, and it's all these things, burnout, etc. What was it like for you in the beginning, looking back as the full dispatcher that you are now?
Well, in the beginning, again, it was a lot of imposter syndrome anyway, but
Mm.
it was, I immediately got into it, as far as like the policing part of it. And, you're watching cops during your lunch hour and you're getting involved in that. And so from that aspect, there was just a ton to learn. So that was really fun.
Mm.
But man, the training program at the time was really anti-customer service.
Mm.
Like they wanted to beat that out of you. Like you were the police department. You want to sound like the police department. You're not going to thank people for calling. Why would
Mm.
you thank somebody for calling? But it turns out that's none of that is what I teach now.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, it was wild because you go into this room full of people. Some of them had been there 20 or more years at the time, and they just did this really complicated job just effortlessly. If I
Mm.
can say that, I can't even say that effortlessly.
Big word.
Anyway, yeah, they just they just whip through all these things, could handle this crazy stuff, shootings and whatever, and without even like breaking a sweat, or they're excited about getting those kind of calls.
Mm.
And so to me, that was like, oh, that's what I want to be when I grow up. I want to be like them. Um, but and so I got through training, and we all have our training scars, and I could probably bore you with
Mm.
lots of training scar stories, but uh, got through training, and I got on my own, and had some rocky first times of calls because every call is a different call, and every time you get a new situation, you're trying to test things you've never done before in the wild.
Mhm.
And so that's always exciting. But then I got the opportunity to be a trainer because we just needed people desperately. So I think they thought I couldn't do any harm. Like the AED, it was like it's like it could help, it's not going to hurt, and I'd be
Yeah.
a crowd pleaser. So, but that's how I really learned how to do the job, was to have to teach it to somebody else.
Mm.
And so I'll
Mhm.
probably slip and call it an FTO because we still call it an FTO. But yeah, as
Okay.
far as CTOing, that is super important. And like that is what has basically kept me going this whole time. It's just because having new trainees and getting new experiences training people, it's always different. It's you can add to your skill sets with every different training you get. And
Mhm.
then recently I've been able to do training full time in like an academy setting and in service training. So
Awesome.
you had an episode with Samantha Hawkins on before,
Yes.
and
Samantha's
my
great.
boss actually sent me a text and said, "Download this podcast and listen to this episode."
Hey,
Um,
shout out, boss. That's
yeah,
what we're talking about.
absolutely.
Tell your friends.
And it's like, oh, and it was at that point, I was like, yeah, this is what I'm trying to do. I think her title is like dispatch training technician,
Yeah, something
and
like that.
yeah,
Mhm.
and my title is like dispatch training specialist,
Mm,
sort of
mhm.
the same thing.
Yeah.
But it's like, yeah, okay, I was this old when I found out I wanted to be Samantha Hawkins when I grew up. So, and actually, I reached out to her,
Uh-huh.
and and she's great, and I love this whole community thing.
Mhm.
There's some really good avenues with some really quality people. You've had a ton of people on your show
Mhm.
that are just super happy to help anybody who's got questions, and very giving.
No, it's mind blowing, right? Like when you really start reaching out to folks who are, really putting themselves out there in the dispatch community, how willing to help they really truly are. Even something as simple as like what resources I'm giving my trainees. Like I'm willing to share that document with you. Like those things go such a long way because like you said, the CTO, the trainer job is so important to our individual centers and our career in general are because if they have a poor experience, they're not going to want to keep doing this job, or they're going to feel like they can't do this job because they weren't given the proper tools, and then it just kind of creates this toxic environment. Like
Oh yeah.
having good CTOs is like is the foundation, I think, of a center, truly.
Oh yeah. And once somebody, your trainer, as long as you guys are working together, they're always going to be your trainer. I mean, you're always going to rely on them for advice, and because they're somebody whose opinion you respect and who you've had a personal connection. Because when you first start, again, I don't know about your experience, but man, they didn't want to know your name. The other dispatchers, non-trainers, because they're like, you're probably not going to make it through training. So why would I want to get emotionally invested in like learning your name? So.
It's so true. Like I've heard horror stories of people telling me like how they were treated recently by their trainers, like in that type of mentality, like this like Hunger Games style of training.
Yeah.
And like I don't see as a former athlete, as a former coach, as like a teammate, I don't see the benefit in giving that to someone. Like how is that going to help us like get better?
Well, exactly.
I don't see it.
Yeah. And I mean, you're taking your resource and you're just wasting it. And it's the whole thing. The thing I like about the dispatching thing is that, I mean, we're a medium-sized center, so we probably have like between 9 and 11 people on the floor at any time. And so it's a team. Everything is a team effort. So whether you want it to be or not, as it turns out. So, you have to rely on each other. And if somebody, they just looks at you and say, well, you're not going to make it. Like, guys don't do a good job as dispatch, or, I just don't like the way you look or the way you sound, or that you're too nice to people, or whatever the thing is. It's like, well, that's not cool. And it's wasting everybody's time and money too.
Exactly. Like I've probably said it on here 1,000 times, but the first day of my academy, our academy folks came in and the first thing they did was they threw out this huge number and they were like, that's how much money we spent to get you through backgrounds, to get you through this, to get you through that, to have you in the seat. We want you to succeed. It's costing us this amount of money. Like, we're invested in you. So help us help you. What do you need? What are the tools? Like, so like from the jump, we knew, like there's a buy-in, right? My department has literally financially bought into me being successful. And if I'm not successful, they are losing that amount of money on me. So they do want me to be successful. And if you're in a CTO role and a supervisor role, and even at your bare minimum, you're not fundamentally thinking about it that way, what are we doing? Like
exactly.
It is a business, obviously. Like departments are businesses, and we understand that, but we are the people who make up these departments, and we are responsible for the success of people we're bringing in.
Oh, absolutely. And, not everybody is going to make it. I mean, the job isn't for everybody for lots of different reasons. And that's fine. I mean, there's a certain amount of that that's great. I mean, like I said, if these days, if we can figure out somebody, it just wasn't the right choice from the very beginning. Hey, as early as we can decide that together, great. That just, again, saves everybody time and heartache. But, I mean, you invest time and lots of emotions. I mean, one of the things, when I first started being like an academy instructor, I was teaching call taking because I really think call taking is a huge part of the whole thing. Like bad call taking can actually like just hurt the situation from the get-go. But one of the things I would tell people is I just want somebody to tell you guys that, we hired you because you have been successful. You guys are super smart. You're probably the smartest person in any room, and you haven't probably failed in your career a lot to this point. And, for the next, 6 to 9 months or however long it's going to take you to train, you're going to fail every single day.
A lot.
Yeah. And, so just be prepared for that,
Yeah.
and it's going to be it's going to be a humbling experience, and nobody wants you to fail.
Yeah.
But part of the process is, you're not going to be able to do it as well as somebody who's done it 5, 10, 15 years or whatever. And when you first start, we're giving you information, we're shooting at you with the fire hose, and you're trying to catch it with a Dixie cup as a trainee. And so, we know it takes such a long time to train because you're gonna have to do a lot of learning and practicing and getting it wrong. But that's the thing is, I just wanted somebody to know, like, to tell them, this, you might cry in training. Like, I don't want to make you cry. Like, I would never want, like, I'm a cheerleader type of trainer as far as that goes. Like, if you have if you take a bad call or you make a mistake or something, we're just going to fix it. We're going to learn from it and we're going to move on. But, on the other hand, it's at the end of a long day, if you haven't had a very successful day, it's not going to feel great. And even when I don't know about you, but even when I was first, cut loose on my own, there were plenty of days I was just happy to get out of there without something bad happening.
So true. Like, man, I used to stay through academy like every week, like, I'm still employed.
Yeah.
Did
Absolutely.
it. And sometimes it is, especially when you're just getting your feet wet. It's just making it through the day, knowing you did your best and no glaring mistakes. We can always do better, right?
Yeah.
But there aren't any glaring mistakes that I'm beating myself up about, and I can go home knowing I did a good job that day. Totally.
Yeah.
Totally a thing.
I mean, it's a fine line too, because, I tell people, if you're your own worst critic, you'll be a better dispatcher. But I mean, you'll die early of a stress-related illness. That's a whole other thing. Not really my business. But yeah, I mean, you're always going to be able to do it better. And that's what makes us better as dispatchers is that, you can, you realize that you've taken the wrong turn in a call, or, you weren't keeping up with traffic like you should have on the radio or something. And you just want to do better next time. So you don't have, you've experienced that feeling now. So I don't want to have that feeling again. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's one thing that when we talk about like training and like CTOs and that relationship and creating that team environment is that when the shit hits the fan, like that teamwork really comes in. I mean, I'm definitely at a smaller agency now, but even when I was at a larger agency, we start getting like a hot call, like a shooting downtown, or like something starts popping off. Everyone starts like just working together, like especially on the radio side, right? Like we have a code 33 or an emergency beeper on the channel, someone's going to the backup channel, someone's calling, the other agencies, if they have helicopters, dogs, like whatever the thing is, everybody just starts activating and working to help each other get through this thing that's happening at that moment. And if we are already like funking and like there's a toxic environment, it's just not going to be so smooth. Like when the shit hits the fan, right? It's going to be a little more bumpy. We're going to be blaming each other. Like you didn't get this person fast enough. You didn't start fight, like whatever the thing is. But having that teamwork and having that environment already there when things do happen in a comm center, when we're taking like multiple calls, that's when the teamwork really ignites. And that's when that environment is so important so we can thrive in that chaos.
Oh yeah. And that's when you see it work like that, when you have like a big event and everybody just jumps in without being asked and just takes a part in it. It's great. And you just want to be part of that team. Like, I just want to be that good, and that was what I wanted to aspire to. And that's another reason why you want to be nice to your trainees, because they're going to be your backup. They're going to be a member of that team.
Yeah.
And, if you treated them poorly when you need them, they might not be, I don't know, they're jumping on it. Like, they'll get to it when they get to it. But, maybe they're not coming to your aid as quite as fast as if you were nice to them.
Yeah. And I mean, it all comes down to like, I want the person I train to be on my team because I know they know their shit, right? Like
Exactly.
they got this because I train them and I know my stuff. So I want them I want to pick them if we're on the blacktop and we're going, I'm picking everyone I trained for sure because I know I've given them all the tools, all the support, all the things to make them successful and to be a successful teammate.
Yeah.
And that's all we're just looking to stack our bench, that's all we're trying
Exactly.
to
Yeah.
do
Well,
at the end of the day.
I mean, you're so right. Like you can anticipate each other's moves because you have
Mhm.
played together before,
Yes,
And even when you go to
exactly.
different shifts or whatever, it's still the same kind of, you sort of
Mhm.
learn like the new atmosphere and you have to deal with the different flavor of toxicity or whatever.
That's
Uh,
so true.
but all in all, you're still relying on each other, and that makes it a huge difference. Which is again another reason why, like, I love the dispatch part of it. That's why, like, the nice thing about dispatching is it's a kind of because it's sort of a specialized thing. It's a job not everybody can do, so it's kind of cool. But
Yeah.
it's also, you can do it kind of under the radar. Like, I
Yeah.
spent my first 15 years just happy if no commanders knew my name. Like, it's like, oh yeah, okay, you're that guy that works there. That's fine. Hey, Billy, you like call me Billy or Wayne or something. I'd be like, sure, that's fine.
The worst is like when the detectives or the lieutenants come in and they're plain clothes, and I'm like, I haven't seen you before. And
Oh, exactly. Yeah,
I can't place their name because they don't got the tag on them. And I'm
exactly.
just
Yeah,
like, and they ask you to do something, you're like, I'm sorry, your last name again. And I'm like, and it's like the chief. You're like, oh, sorry.
exactly. Yeah. Oh yeah, 100%. It's like, well, you got in the building. I assume you belong here. What
Just
can I do
assume your
for you?
tag worked, right?
Yeah,
You got in here.
exactly.
My gosh. Do you remember any of your first calls for service or any early calls?
Well, yeah, the one that stands out is so have you seen the movie The Negotiator?
Yes.
Okay, so it's 1998, Sam Jackson and Kevin Spacey, right?
Mm.
And so I got cut loose as a dispatcher in 1996 in August, and it was probably maybe that next November, maybe December, January, some winter time, and there was a suicidal guy.
Mm.
And it was a situation where we used to be able to cold call suicidal people. If we got a secondhand report of a suicidal person, we could
Mm.
just call the suicidal person and say, hey, what's up?
Hey.
Yeah. Now we let the officers do that once they get into position. It
Mhm.
seems safer that way.
Yeah.
Although I still love it. But yeah, so I called this guy, and I'm all brand shiny new dispatcher. And his first words when he answered the phone were, what agency do you represent?
Ooh.
So I
Like, ooh,
knew it.
damn, I knew I should have blocked my number.
Well, I mean, and he had been drinking, and he had a SKS like assault rifle, and he was by himself in an apartment building, and his I think it was either his wife or his girlfriend, whatever. She had just served him divorce papers and a protective order, and was taking their 5-year-old kid because he had an alcohol problem, which I
Yeah.
believe he had just lost a job, or he was going to lose a job because of the alcohol problem, and he had plenty of alcohol on board, right? And he was also pretty flat affect when I talked to him. He didn't have a lot of emotion to him. So
Mhm.
just kind of getting his attention over the phone was kind of hard. And uh, like, I'd like to think now, like, I'm a lot cooler than I was back. Than I was back then, because I was all brand new and squeaky voice dispatcher, I'm sure. Uh, and so I talked to him for about an hour and a half, and the entire time I thought he was going to shoot himself while we were on the phone together.
Mhm.
He kept moving the phone. Officers in the field were saying, yeah, that he kept like walking past a window, and he kept talking about having the barrel up to his throat and stuff. And he was throwing things across the apartment, like beer cans and a remote control or something. So I kept
Mhm.
hearing like sudden bangs and stuff during the whole thing. I know. So it's pretty tense for me. Plus,
Mhm.
I was trying to do this thing, trying to get him to like, yeah, trying to do what now we would call active listening and de-escalation and stuff. And I think we had some suicidal caller training, and it was fine, but we never really practiced it on a very high level. So this was like my first serious thing. And at one point during the conversation, I'm just trying to like get him directed back on me instead of all the bad things and getting escalated. And at one point he stopped and said, what are you, new? I'm sure I said, well, that's immaterial, sir. But yeah, it was like, oh, I'm new and he knows it. So if you remember the movie Negotiator, so later, like I guess the next year, my little brother and I went out to the movies, and I turned to him in the movie theater and said, "Oh my God, I'm Farley. I'm the doofus negotiator like on the team." And so the end of that story, though, so I talked to him for an hour and a half, and we weren't really getting anywhere. And then an actual police negotiator took over from me, and he talked to him for another hour and a half. And at the end of that time, we just decided that we weren't coming in and he wasn't coming out, and he was there by himself. So we're just going to go away.
Yeah.
And it was super unsatisfying.
Yeah.
And even at the time, people were like, "Hey, you did a great job." I'm like, "Oh, I didn't do a good job at all. I don't know what, like, sure, he didn't kill himself, but it did not feel great to me." Now, I would probably say the same thing now. If I had like a junior chipmunk dispatcher who just went through the same experience, I'd say, "Hey, you did a great job. I mean, he didn't shoot himself, right?"
Yeah.
But man, it was unsatisfying.
Yeah.
So then later, of course, so anytime I could get more training in those kind of skills, I was like, "Oh yeah, I want to jump on that because I need to get better at this part of it."
Excuse me. Well, it's crazy to me, like, being a dispatcher, you're crisis negotiating for an hour and a half before an actual C&T takes over without probably having actual C&T training.
Oh, I had not been through
Right?
a C&T class at that time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what blows my mind is I personally think we all should go through C&T training and be C&T certified.
Oh, 100%.
Because if we make that initial connection with someone and they might not want to talk to Billy, Bob, or Sarah, who picks up the phone, who has a badge, because we've already established that connection, right? And so often, especially at these large agencies where response time is just what response time is because they're traveling a great distance, they're going from high priority call to high priority call, we could be sitting on the phone with a suspect, a mental health crisis, and et cetera, having to do these crisis negotiating skills that we're not fully trained on, that I think the way we should be. And I think it's just something that's really overlooked, and that I think the public maybe doesn't realize how often, even today, dispatchers are put in those situations, having to talk down, having to, stall, having to, crisis negotiate with someone before people arrive on scene to take over.
Well, and so, just recently I got the opportunity to actually go to a real C&T class with officers and the SWAT team and the FBI and all that stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was super cool. And part of it was they they talked about active listening, and active listening is one of those things that is kind of a fad now, it's sort of a buzzword. It's like you'll see it in plenty of business sort of connotations, or just like how to deal with your kids, parenting kind of stuff about, because everybody could benefit from active listening. And, like the sort of the cynical dispatcher side of me is like, okay, yeah, everybody listen to everybody. Great. Whatever. Kumbaya. But when you realize that, okay, so active listening is, if you use the individual techniques that they teach you in the C&T class, the whole more pies thing where you have all the different like minimal encouragers and I statements and all those things that are, that seem really weird unless you have somebody in crisis, and then you really need to lean on that kind of stuff. But you realize that kind of training, like that, just the negotiation skills and the de-escalation skills and just building empathy is super important, even for just your regular old caller who's upset about a parking problem.
Yeah.
I mean, a caller calls in and is really or angry about something we don't even do, like a barking dog. Like, we don't handle barking dog calls. That's animal control. That's not our problem.
Mm-hmm.
I can give you a number to call, but why did you call us? But the thing is, they're just calling for help, right? They called 911 or 311 or whatever number they got to get to me. And, they call up and they say, well, I don't know who to call, but we have this problem. Well, I guess I could lecture them, I suppose. But it's not worth my time to do that.
Yeah.
Better, I can just throw in, I don't know, like some emotional labeling and just say, hey, that sounds frustrating. But here's what we can do. Let me give you the number for animal control. And if at the very least, they'll, they're not going to remember me. I mean, that's another part about being a dispatcher is if you're doing your job really well, least the call taker part of it, nobody's going to remember they talked to you.
Yeah.
They had an emergency. They called for help. The help came. They got the problem solved, right? When you do something wrong, they'll remember you. I mean, they'll certainly
True.
play your tape on the news if you do something wrong.
Yeah, we don't
But
want that.
yeah, but it just using those kind of skills, just for, I mean, even your coworkers. It's kind of funny. After I just like a week or so after I took the CNT class, I was working as the acting supervisor that day. And so one of my coworkers came up to me and he was a little bit upset about whatever the fire department's policy on some sort of thing. Like they weren't going to go to a call that we wanted them to go to, or they wanted us to go to a call that we didn't want to, something like that, right? Just a normal sort of thing.
The ongoing police and fire struggle. Yeah.
And so, so he comes to me and he tells me this whole thing. And he knows I can't fix the problem, right? So of course I turned to him and I said, that sounds pretty frustrating. And he looked at me and said, "Don't use your tricks on me, Eric." Like, yeah, okay, well, what you can do.
Can't fool everybody.
Yeah. And if you do it poorly, it's going to sound silly.
Yeah.
That's why when you get into the heart of the, that whole like repetitive persistence thing where you're talking at like the same tone, the same words, just repeating the same thing so that you can get through to that person. You're not having that conversation with your mom like that. I mean, like if or you go out to your friends like for dinner or something, you're not going to use those techniques on that because you look like an idiot, like a weirdo. But we have these tools in our toolbox that we sometimes forget to use. Because especially, and again, I don't know about your experience, but policing, paramilitary, whatever, it's all very like, they teach you the warrior spirit, and I mean, even our communication techniques like verbal judo, it's all very like martial art based, and that's great. Don't get me wrong, but
time and place.
Yeah, but not like it turns out the person on the other end of that phone call is not your enemy. Like I'm not at war with you. I don't have, I mean, I can bring out all the Sun Tzu things all you want, but if I realize that I'm not fighting with you, then we don't have to have a fight.
Yeah.
Like you hear your coworkers sometimes who, they'll get somebody who comes in really angry or like having a mental health crisis or, intoxicated with God knows what, high on airplane glue or something, and calls up and decides he's going to just yell at you or whatever. And you can yell at him back if you want. I mean, you've seen the bumper stickers that say, we're 911, we're here to save your behind, we're not here to kiss it. Yeah. But it's like, I don't advocate that we have to like cater to everybody or, you don't get to, I'm not your punching bag. So a citizen isn't going to call me and like start yelling stuff at me and I just have to sit there and take it. But I don't, there's no reason for, there's nothing I gain out of it by just going off on them.
Yeah.
I mean,
and I'm a big believer in like energy is contagious, right? So if this person is yelling at me, whatever, and I'm just continuing to have good energy, helpful, like it's going to go one or two ways. They're either going to get on my hype and my energy train, or I'm going to have to set some hard professional boundaries and like, have to stop the conversation. This isn't being productive. You don't have a life or death medical emergency, whatever. I'm going to disconnect this call, and we can set those boundaries as well.
Sure.
Because we are not, as you said, punching bags. But if I'm matching that person's negative energy, we're just going to get into a loop. It's not helpful, right? So at the end of the day, it's our job to provide some sort of customer service while, of course, still protecting ourselves and being professional when we have vulgar, combative callers, right? We're not just, you don't get to call and yell at me. That's not going to happen. But I'm going to do everything I can to de-escalate you, get you on my happy train. Like, this is my 11th hour of work. Help me be happy in this phone call.
Well, I mean, and I'm a firm believer also in like you have to bring your own positive attitude to work because one will not be provided to you at the door for sure. So like, and you have to realize, I got to bring my positive attitude with me because if I get super negative, that's not going to help anybody. It's just going to make it's going to cause me to have stress, and that's not cool. Plus, if somebody comes at and I answer the phone call and somebody just is really inappropriately angry for what I don't consider to be a good reason. there were plenty of time. Like I've gone through all the different cycles, probably several times of being, sort of burnt out and cynical and probably a little bit cranky. But now I consider that an opportunity. I mean, if somebody calls and just is all spooled up, I mean, obviously, if they have some mental health call, it's a whole different set of skills. I mean, similar, but so I'm not exactly on board to spend a lot of time talking to somebody like that who's going to be abusive. But if somebody calls up about a parking problem and is just super angry about it, that's a challenge to me. That's hey, I get paid to be unflappable.
Yeah.
Like I'm just the calm voice on the phone. If you call me because you can hear it when you get a dispatcher who, even like the crankiest old dispatcher who is just 911, what do you want? When you're talking to like a little kid or to a sexual assault victim or something, like even the crustiest of those people will shift into the gear of like, I'm going to talk to them because they're a child. I'm going to talk to them because they're a victim of a serious crime who's vulnerable. And so you can see, okay, we have those skills. Why don't we use those skills just on everybody?
Exactly.
Like, and also like with workplace toxicity, you can use those skills. Oh, I don't know, on your coworkers, like give them a little grace too.
I think giving ourselves grace in this line of work is so important, because I think sometimes we can kind of forget that we're human doing this job.
Oh yeah.
Right? Like, we know people who have been victims. We know people who have been suspects. We have been victims ourselves. I mean, we bring all of those things into our centers because we are humans as well. And I think sometimes when we get these calls or we get these, even mental health situations, we all have someone in our lives that we know who struggles with mental health in some way, shape, or form. And when we sometimes forget that, we can get a little more on the toxic side, of judging our callers or being really quick to be negative with our callers because, we're getting so much influx of those type of calls. But if we can just, at the end of the day, realize like this person is like me in more ways probably than they're not, and really reach to that part of ourselves, we're going to help more people. We're going to be happier, and not as upset at the end of our workday than maybe we would be if we chose to just kind of be rude to the people who are rude to us, etc.
Yeah. I mean, as much as I want to be super chill all day long, oh no, at hour 11, I am not as patient as I was in hour 2, for sure. And if the people around me are kind of in bad moods, like that's contagious for sure. And it's not even just bad moods. It's like you work with somebody who's like super aggressive or, even somebody who's like super sweary. Like I don't mind bad words. I actually like bad words, but you work with somebody who like swears all the time and suddenly you'll find yourself swearing all the time. And that's just because that kind of stuff is contagious. So I'm happy to gaslight myself. Like if you ask me how I'm doing, every day is a happy day because it has to be.
Yeah.
Because it's like, what are we doing if it's not? I mean, I did want to, way back in the interview, I did say I wanted to help people, right? So, part of my job is helping people. And if you're mean to people, even again, your coworkers, or, you even have like from the interdepartmental things, suddenly we're having like opinions about the performance of like their records clerks or the officers or whatever. And it's like, well, sure, we all have our opinions or whatever. But, the more we get all salty about that kind of stuff, it's like, that doesn't help anybody.
Yeah. And if you're finding yourself like caught in a loop where you're just like not feeling it, having a bad day, like you're probably experiencing some burnout. Like if you can't pull yourself out of it, right? And that's when we need to do some self-care, take some mental health days. Like that's a thing. You have the time. It's yours to use. We don't just have to have sniffles and a cough and a sore throat to take a day, like if you need it, take it.
Yeah, that's the thing is that, obviously, like I don't want to encourage absenteeism, but you're right.
No,
it's not like it's like there are jobs where you can go to work and you're just kind of basically dragging your ass and kind of get through the day and it'll be fine. But if you are not capable of performing when something bad happens, you shouldn't be there.
Yes,
Yeah,
and that's what we're talking about, not going to the beach
yeah,
because you'd rather
exactly.
not be at work.
Yeah,
We're talking about, like, you needing to take care of yourself
yeah. Oh, 100%.
because we're taking care of so many people doing this, strangers who will never remember us, never talk to us again, and will just kinda be a fading voice in the background of their memories. And sometimes we just need a day to ourselves, and I am all for coming in to cover a coworker's shift if they need that day. Now, if you need 400 days in a row, we are talking about
Yeah,
something a little more serious that's gonna need a little more care, right?
yeah.
But in all actuality, we are still humans doing this job, and we have to take care of ourselves so we can, like Eric, spend 27 years doing this because it's a grind.
Oh, yeah. No, and that's the thing is that, um, you you never know, like, you never know the situations or the calls that are gonna be the ones that, like,
Mhm,
really impact you. Like,
mhm,
like the worst some people, people will ask you, I'm sure people ask you too, it's like,
mhm.
what's the worst call you ever taken? And it's like,
Yeah.
well, it's hard. Like the
Yeah.
worst calls I've ever taken, frankly, are um, 3 times in my career I've taken calls that I loaded them as disturbances because it sounded like just a knockdown, drag out fight was happening, but
Mhm.
it was really somebody who had been co-sleeping with their infant and had smothered them in their sleep.
Mhm.
And so when they call you, there's all the family and everybody's screaming, and it's horrible. Even before I had kids, it was horrible.
Yeah.
Um, but it's not even, I mean, and that's definitely that'll bring you down. Um,
Yeah.
but also just like the end of a long week when suddenly it's like the 15th parking problem angry person you're talking to, I mean, you have to recognize it in yourself. Like if, again, as you said before, if every caller is a jerk in a row, it's like, well, there's one common person and it's not them. So
Yeah.
take a break. I mean, one thing about my department is we've been really good about like the wellness thing, to the
Awesome.
best that we can. We just want to focus on it.
Mhm.
And we know because I want my coworkers to be working here for 20 years.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't, if you get burned out and quit after like 4 years, I mean, that's not really money well spent for the department either. Right.
Facts. Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. So yeah, it's super important, especially, and it's amazing when departments really get on board with it and they don't use those words and those things to check a box, and they're
Yeah,
actually, like, intentional with wellness and, like, really
exactly.
advocating wellness for their people, because I think we've all experienced something that starts circling around in the industry and the department implements it, and you're like, see it for a week, and then it goes away, and you're like, "Well, what happened to that thing we were talking about being so important for us?" So,
Yeah.
it is super important for departments and ourselves to advocate for ourselves in those avenues and let our agencies know, like, this is important to keep us here and wanting to work here and wanting to do this job. We need some help and some support in these areas. So if you're at a department that doesn't have a peer support team, that doesn't really focus on wellness, there are so many folks in the dispatch realm who are out there waiting to give feedback on how to create their own peer support teams and like
Oh yeah.
implement those things in departments. So if you're sitting here like, I want a peer support team, and you're listening, you're like, we don't have one of those. There are so many resources and people out there on LinkedIn in the dispatch world that are just like, let me show you how I did this.
Oh,
So
yeah. I mean, that's again all the bad parts of social media. That's been really awesome because again, people like we talked about before, people are happy to help. It's been
mhm,
amazing. And yeah, as far as peer support, when I started, there was no peer support except we made our own. It was called the
mhm.
parking lot after work, and at that time we worked 8-hour days, and so I'd be
Yeah,
in
and
the
they
parking
got
lot.
weird when you started bringing cake stands there and like
Oh, that's the thing is like you're in the parking lot for an extra hour after your shift because you have
Yeah,
enough to vent from the end of that day.
yeah.
And and you need that. You need to be able to vent and with people that understand you.
Mhm, mhm.
So
I think that's definitely a big part is, like, the understand part, right? Is, like, we don't wanna overstuff our world with only people and first responder, right? Like, that's a little,
oh no.
like, much, right? We don't want
Yeah.
that. But there is a certain level of you get it, and I don't have to explain why this is bothering me, whereas maybe someone outside of the field would just be like, "Ah, that doesn't sound like a big deal," or depending on whatever the thing is. There is something to say with someone who gets it. It does help when you're venting to folks like that. So definitely having those supports, and it doesn't have to be an official peer support
Oh
situation.
no, not at
It
all.
can just be, your best homie at work who gets it, who understands the vibe, and that's the person you talk to. Whatever it looks like to you, it's not going to be the same for everybody.
Yeah. And I mean, that's again, having, again, I'm pretty lucky because, my wife knows that sometimes if I need to vent, like, I just need to vent. Like, she's not there. She's not going to solve my problem. Like, she doesn't really get it, obviously as much as I do because she doesn't work in the field.
Yeah.
But she's a happy ear, as far as like I can complain about something or whatever and vent it that way and at least be heard. But not have to say like, well, have you talked about like, no, I don't, you don't, because you don't want somebody like not to use terms in derision, but like a civilian,
Yeah.
to like tell you like how to fix your job as in law enforcement. It's like, that's not helpful.
Yeah, that's definitely not. So after all this time, how do you feel this job has changed you?
Well, I mean, I've been through lots of different cycles because I definitely have been, through the burnout and being really cynical. But one of the things is, you talk to so many people in different situations. And like one example I use is like before I had a child, I had lots of opinions about being a parent. I was such a great parent before I had kids. And then you realize, oh yeah, it turns out this is hard. And
they're just trying to survive.
Yeah. And as it turns out also, like I can be judgmental with lots of stuff. Like I don't know how, the guy who's harassing you for change on the street, I don't know how he got there. And, as far as like protecting yourself as you're walking across the street, it doesn't really matter. But being able to like talk to people with all different types of problems and all different situations, I think hopefully has made me just a little bit less judgmental and a little bit more understanding of, oh yeah, it's not like one mistake that like makes you a bad person. It's like a whole series of events usually. And, the other thing is like, I thought maybe in the beginning I had this idea that, you could save people, right? Like we're here to save lives and everything, which there are a couple situations where you can do that. But really, for the most part, my job is to take people from point A to point B. Like I will never see the rest of their journey. Like I will never know how it turns out at the end, but I can be satisfied with that now. Like, hey, I'm just here to help you from here to here. It's a little piece. So like recognizing my little piece in a bigger picture, I think is something I gained from that.
Yeah, I really resonate with that. I never looked at it like that before. And I think when you think about first responder jobs in general, like that's the big, buzzword, right? We're going to save lives, but looking at it that way is like, I'm here to take you from point A to point B. And that's that, I'm going to do my best during that journey and, hand you off to whatever next service that is, whether it's a referral to animal control or, my officers helping you get some help at county. You know what I mean? Like whatever that is. So I thank you for sharing that. It's a really good way to look at what we do, I think.
And the longer you work someplace, you realize, oh, we talk to people all the time. I mean, you talk to people like again, like no matter what station in life they are, you might talk to that same person again in a different situation. And if, like I said, if they remember you, usually it's for something you didn't do right.
Ain't that the truth?
But just the ability, and we kind of oversell this too, I think, as far as, you only have the one chance to make a first impression, but people don't have a lot of opportunity to have positive interactions with the police anyway. And you're not usually calling me for a good reason, but at least I can make your day not worse,
Yeah. I've gotten into the habit of when they're like, oh, police department, how can I help you? They're like, how are you doing today? I go, I'm good. How can I help you? Because I know they're not doing good. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I'm not going to ask you how you are because it's a setup because I know
Yeah.
you do not call me when you're having a good day. So how can I help you? I'm here for that.
Yeah. Just pivot right to what we want to know in a happy way, in a friendly way, but still.
I don't want the, well, I'm not, I don't want the trap, I think.
But even then you still have to be, you still have to be sort of genuine. You can't be like, I'm fine.
Yeah.
What do you want?
Like, I'm doing good. How can I help you today?
Yeah,
Like, that's my
exactly.
go-to. I'm like,
Like
I'm not
I just don't want people to answer the phone for the police department and sound like, the worst impression of a DMV clerk, next in the line,
For real. Yeah, for sure. Well, as we come to a close, it's been amazing. What advice would you give someone who is considering a career in dispatch?
I'd just say if you can type fast and you can think on your feet and you want to learn a lot about a lot, go for it. I mean, it's pretty rewarding. I'm pretty happy with as it turns out, a career. I didn't intend to be here 27 years, but hey, I like what I'm doing. I could retire in 3 years, and actually, I was lucky enough to have a defined benefit, so I could, actually retire with some defined benefit or whatever. But
Awesome.
why would I want to? I mean,
Mm,
I'm actually having a decent time doing what I'm doing, and I'm actually helping my community,
mm.
and it just makes a difference. So,
And I think that is the goal, right? Is like I remember when my dad got to retire, he put it off another year and he's just like, why do I need to retire? I like my job,
yeah,
like I like going to work. I like doing the thing. And that is, I think, the goal, right? No matter what you end up doing in life is like when it comes time to not have to work anymore, if the job is fulfilling and you enjoy doing it, yeah, keep doing it. And that's what we should be setting people up in this line of work to be at the end of their, retirement time is like, I'm gonna keep going a couple more years. I
yeah,
don't mind it. This is good. I don't mind getting up and going to do this. That is definitely the centers, the energy, the realities of the work world that we're trying to facilitate in our comm centers.
absolutely, yeah.
Awesome. Well, Eric, again, thank you so much for coming and jumping on the show with me. It's been amazing. I have so many little notes in here to edit out and like piece off.
Well,
I
thank you for having me.
Yeah, it was like so edit out meaning like pull them so I can show the world like little
Oh,
clips
okay.
of our amazing conversation.
Yeah, well, I was
Really,
saying
it
thank you
didn't
for
come
the
out so clear.
yeah, the bravery of someone you have never met and just
I
invite them into
know.
your podcast to possibly be a lunatic, but oh
Oh
well.
my gosh, I'm winging it completely. So thank you for
It turns
making
out
it
we're
so
all winging it, right?
right? Isn't
Yeah,
that the truth?
yeah. So
Again, thank you so much. I'll be right back with you.
great, thank you.
All right, everybody. That was another amazing episode here on Let's Talk Dispatch. Eric, thank you again for coming onto the show, sharing your wisdom, sharing all your years of learning and growing through this job. It's definitely something that really sticks with us and changes us a bit. So thank you for sharing your journey with me. If you're interested on coming onto the show, just head to the raspydispatcher.com. Under the Let's Talk Dispatch podcast tab, there's a Be Our Guest section. You pick a date and time that works for you. It is really simple. As Eric said, we've never met before. So I really do talk to anybody and everyone who's willing to talk about dispatch and their journey or how they help first responders in the business that they're in currently. Like, subscribe, tell a friend, leave a 5-star review. It really does help us. And thank you all so much for tuning in. Until next time, stay raspy. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Let's Talk Dispatch, a Raspy Dispatcher production. If you like the podcast, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, leave a 5-star review, and of course, tell a friend. If you want to be a guest, head to the raspydispatcher.com and check out our additional resources. Until next time, stay raspy, everybody.